The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss, and 5 humans stepped out onto the landing platform of the Galactic Interspecies Academy for the very first time. Maya Chen was the first to feel it, the strange, wonderful lightness in her legs, like the whole world had decided to be a little kinder to her bones. She took a breath, and the air rushed into her lungs, so easily that she almost laughed. It was rich and cool and sweet, better than any mountain air she had ever tasted back on Earth. "Is it just me?" Darius Okonkwo said from behind her, rolling his massive shoulders. "Or do I feel like I could jump over that building right now?" "Please do not jump over any buildings," Maya said, but she was smiling, because she felt it too, that strange electric energy running through every muscle in her body. The 5 of them stood together on the platform and looked out at the Galactic Interspecies Academy spread before them like something from a dream. Crystal towers rose into a pale violet sky, connected by bridges that seemed to float on nothing at all. Vast biodomes dotted the campus, each one glowing a different color to match the climate of whatever species lived inside. The air smelled like flowers that had no name in any Earth language. Lena Voronova, the quietest of the group, simply looked at everything and said nothing. She had the calm, watchful eyes of someone who had grown up in the coldest part of Siberia, where you learn to observe first and speak later. She noted the gravity, the air, the temperature, and stored it all away like data in a machine. Tomas Reyes was already bouncing on his toes. "I feel like a superhero," he whispered to Priya Sharma, who was standing beside him with a small notebook already in her hand. "The gravity here is roughly 70% of Earth's standard," Priya said, scribbling something down. "The oxygen content in the atmosphere is at least 3% higher than what we breathe at home. Our bodies are going to perform significantly better here than they do on Earth." "So basically," Tomas said with a grin that stretched across his whole face, "we got a free upgrade?" Before Priya could answer, a figure approached them from across the platform. Small, delicate, and glowing. The creature was barely a meter tall, with translucent skin that pulsed with soft blue and green light beneath the surface. 2 enormous dark eyes blinked up at them, and the glow flickered nervously between yellow and orange. "Welcome," the small being said in a voice that trembled slightly. "I am really of the Korvani people. I have been assigned as your campus liaison and guide." He paused and looked up at Darius, who towered over him like a friendly mountain. "You are very large." Darius laughed, and it was a big, warm sound that echoed across the platform. "And you are very shiny, little buddy. I like it." Riley's glow shifted to a confused purple. He did not know what to do. With friendliness from a Deathworld species. He had read the briefing files. He had seen the classification, Earth, Category 7, one of the most dangerous habitable worlds ever catalogued by the Galactic Survey Corps. The documents described a planet of extreme gravity, violent weather, active tectonic instability, and an ecosystem where nearly every organism was either a predator, venomous, parasitic, or all 3 at once. And now 5 of its children were standing in front of him, smiling. Riley led them across the campus toward the first-year orientation hall. As they walked, every species they passed stopped to stare. A tall insectoid Vilathi pressed itself against a wall to let them pass. A group of feathered Tessavari students whispered behind their wings. 2 Gellish, blob-like beings that communicated through vibrations, rippled with visible anxiety. "They are afraid of us," Lena said quietly to Maya. "I know," Maya replied. "Just smile and keep walking. Are not here to scare anyone." The orientation hall was enormous, built to hold hundreds of students from dozens of species. At the front of the hall stood a stage, and on that stage stood the most impressive alien any of them had yet seen. Sergeant Instructor Keth Voren of the Shelvari species was nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 powerful arms and skin like polished gray stone. His posture was rigid and perfect, his eyes sharp and cold. He had the look of someone who had spent his entire life building something he was deeply proud of, and that something was pain. "Welcome, first-year students," Kethvorin said, his voice booming through the hall without any need for amplification. "You have been chosen from across the galaxy to attend this academy. You represent the finest minds and bodies your worlds have to offer." He paused, and his gaze swept the room like a blade. "But intelligence alone will not carry you here. You will be tested, not just in your minds, but in your life, flesh, your endurance, and your will." He raised all four hands, and a massive holographic display appeared behind him. It showed a sprawling, multi-terrain obstacle complex that stretched across kilometers of ground. "This," Kethvorin said with obvious reverence, "is the Crucible of Valor. It is the ultimate fitness evaluation ever designed by the Galactic Academy system. Every first-year student must pass it before the end of their first semester." The display cycled through images of the Crucible stages, speed courses, strength challenges, environmental endurance chambers, a 10-kilometer cross-terrain route, and a towering vertical climb that disappeared into artificial clouds. The alien students around the hall shifted and murmured with visible fear. "The Crucible is calibrated to push every known species to the absolute edge of their biological capacity," Kethvorin continued. "In 200 years, the pass rate has been 38%. No student, not one in the entire history of this academy, has ever achieved a perfect score." He let that sink in, clearly savoring the weight of it. Maya leaned over to Darius. "What do you think?" Darius squinted at the holographic display, studying the obstacles. "Honestly, it kind of looks like a tough mud run back home," he shrugged. "Could be fun." Across the aisle, Riley heard this, and his glow went completely white, the Corvani equivalent of pure shock. After the presentation, the humans gathered outside the hall, stretching and talking casually, while other students filed past them with wide, frightened eyes. "So, that environmental endurance thing," Tomas said, cracking his neck. "Did he say the heat phase maxes out at 45 degrees Celsius?" "That is what he said," Priya confirmed. "I grew up in Mexico City summers. I used to play football in worse than that," Tomas added. "And the cold phase goes down to -15, Lena said. She almost smiled, which for Lena was the equivalent of laughing out loud. "I wore shorts in colder weather than that as a child." Maya looked at each of them and felt a quiet pride. She had not asked for this assignment. None of them had. They were the first humans ever admitted to the Galactic Interspecies Academy, a decision that had been fought over at the highest levels of galactic politics. Half the galaxy thought Deathworld species were too dangerous and too primitive for integration. The other half thought it was too risky to leave them isolated and ignorant of galactic society. Either way, the 5 of them were here now, carrying the weight of their entire species on their shoulders. "Listen up," Maya said. "We are not here to show off. We are not here to scare anyone. We are here to prove that humans belong in this galaxy as partners, not as monsters. So we train hard, we stay humble, and we help anyone who needs it. Understood?" 4 voices answered her at once. Understood. That night, in his private quarters, Kethvorin sat at his desk reviewing the files of every new student. He moved through them quickly. Each species had known biological parameters, predictable strengths and weaknesses, documented limits. Around those limits, he knew exactly how far each body could be pushed. Then he opened the file labeled Human Cohort, Earth. He read the homeworld data, and his 4 hands went very still. Gravity, 1.4 times galactic standard. Atmosphere, volatile oxygen-nitrogen mix, borderline combustible. Average surface temperature variance, 120 degrees, across seasonal and geographic range. Tectonic activity, extreme and ongoing. Predator density, among the highest ever recorded for a habitable world. Deathworld Classification, Category 7. Kethvoron set the file down. He picked it up again. He read the numbers a second time, then a third. Category 7. In all his years, he had never trained a species from anything higher than a Category 2. He closed the file and turned off the light. But he did not sleep well that night, because somewhere deep in the part of his mind that had spent decades understanding the limits of living, a small voice was whispering something he did not want to hear. The voice said, "You have no idea what is coming." In the week before the Crucible of Valor, the Academy required every first-year student to complete a full physical assessment at the medical wing. The tests were simple enough: bone density scans, muscle fiber analysis, cardiovascular efficiency, reflex timing, and respiratory capacity. Every species had known biological baselines, and the medical staff had been running these evaluations for decades without any surprises. Then the humans walked in. The first problem came when the bone density scanner tried to read Darius Okonkwo. The machine hummed, clicked, hummed again, and then displayed an error code that the lead medical technician, a six-limbed Pelori named Dr. Yashin, had never seen before. "This cannot be correct," Dr. Yashin muttered, tapping the screen with two of her hands while the other four adjusted dials. "The scanner is reading your skeletal structure as equivalent to a Class 3 armored species." "Is that bad?" Darius asked. "Examination table," with his legs dangling off the edge like a child at a checkup. "Class 3 armored species have exoskeletons," Dr. Yashin said slowly. "You do not have an exoskeleton, and yet your bones are denser than most creatures that do." She recalibrated the machine and scanned him again. The results were the same. She scanned Maya next. Same readings. She scanned all 5 humans, and every single one of them broke the expected parameters for an endoskeletal bipedal species. The cardiovascular tests were worse, or better, depending on perspective. Priya Sharma's resting heart rate was so low and so steady that the monitoring system flagged her as being in a hibernation state. Lena Voranova's was even lower, and the machine briefly displayed a warning that read, "Subject may be deceased," before a very alive and very unimpressed Lena told the technician that she was fine. "Your hearts," Dr. Yashin said carefully, staring at the data on her screen, "beat fewer times per minute than almost any warm-blooded species in the galactic registry. And yet your cardiac output, the amount of blood your hearts move with each beat, is extraordinary." She looked at them with something between fascination and unease. "What exactly do you do on your planet that requires this level of cardiovascular efficiency?" "We run," Priya said simply. "From predators?" "Sometimes, but mostly just for fun." Dr. Yashin added a note to the file that read, "Species engages in voluntary sustained cardiovascular exertion for recreational purposes. Requires further study." The reflex tests were the final straw. The standard galactic reflex examination involved a small light that flashed at random intervals, and the student had to press a button as fast as possible. The average reaction time across all known species was around 400 milliseconds. The fastest species on record, the predatory Drahini, averaged 280 milliseconds. Reyes hit 160 on his first try, and then asked if he could go again because he thought he could do better. The medical staff stopped talking after that. Word spread quickly through the campus, the way rumors always do, fast and getting bigger with every retelling. By the end of the first day, the story was that the humans had broken the medical scanners. By the end of the second day, the story was that the humans had bones made of metal and hearts that could pump fuel. By the end of the third day, no one was exaggerating anymore, because the truth was strange enough. The Academy Gym became the next stage of the Quiet Revolution. The gym was a vast complex, filled with training equipment designed for dozens of species. Gravitational resistance machines, climbing walls that simulated different planetary surfaces, endurance tracks, and strength testing stations calibrated to the strongest beings in the known galaxy. The strongest of those beings were Drahini, tall, muscular, armored predators who sat at the top of every physical fitness ranking the Academy had ever produced. The gym's highest resistance setting was labeled Drahini Heavy, and it was understood by everyone that this was the ceiling, the absolute maximum that any biological organism could reasonably handle. Darius found this setting on his second day in the gym. He loaded it up, lay down on the gravitational resistance bench, and pressed it 12 times. He sat up, rolled his shoulders, and looked around for a higher setting. When he could not find one, he simply shrugged and moved on to the next machine. A group of Tessevari students watched this happen from across the room. Their feathers stood straight up, a sign of deep alarm, and they left the gym without finishing their workout. Tomas discovered the climbing wall that same afternoon. It was a 60-meter vertical surface designed to simulate cliff-face rescue operations, with shifting, handholds and randomized gravity pockets meant to throw climbers off balance. The fastest recorded time for the wall was just over 4 minutes, held by a Drahini Special Forces candidate from 6 years ago. Tomas went up it in 2 minutes and 20 seconds, and he did a backflip off the top on his way down, because, as he explained to a horrified Riley, it felt right. Priya took to the endurance track, a long-distance running simulator that tracked pace, oxygen consumption, and total distance. She set it to a moderate pace and ran for 2 hours straight, at which point the machine stopped tracking because its software had not been programmed to account for anyone running that long without stopping. She reported the malfunction to a maintenance technician, who stared at her sweat-free face and quietly filed a report with the engineering department. It was on the 4th day that Vas Keltran finally made his move. Vas was the Academy's golden student. Drahini of perfect genetics, peak physical conditioning, and an ego the size of a small moon. He had won every fitness competition the Academy had offered since his arrival. He was expected to set a new record on the Crucible. He had never met anything in the galaxy that could match him physically, and he had absolutely no intention of letting 5 primates from a backwater Deathworld change that. He found Darius in the gym and stood in front of him with his arms crossed and his jaw set. "You," Voss said, "I have been watching you." "Cool," Darius said cheerfully. "Want to work out together?" "I want to challenge you a strength contest. The gravitational press, maximum load, single repetition. Whoever presses the higher weight wins." Darius looked at him for a moment, then smiled the way he always did, big, open, and completely without malice. "Sure, man, sounds fun." They drew a crowd. Almost half the gym stopped what they were doing to watch. Versus the human. It was the matchup everyone had been whispering about all week. Voss went first. He loaded the gravitational press to the highest setting he had ever attempted, took a breath, and pressed it with a roar of effort. His muscles strained, his armored skin flushed dark with exertion, and the weight rose slowly, painfully, to full extension. He held it for a moment, then released. He stood up, breathing hard, and looked at Darius with fierce pride. Darius nodded respectfully, sat down at the press, and loaded it to the same setting. He pressed it once, smoothly, without any visible strain. Then he looked at the controls, added 10% more weight, and pressed it again. Then he added 10% more, and pressed it a third time. The gym was silent. Darius stood up and stretched. "Good warm-up," he said. "What is next?" He was not trying to be cruel. He genuinely did not understand that he had just shattered the most important thing in Voss Keltran's life. Voss stood there, his hands trembling at his sides, and said nothing. He turned and walked out of the gym without a word. That evening, Riley sat in his quarters and added new entries to the document he had been secretly writing since the humans arrived. He had titled it Observations on Humans, a Field Study in Terror, and it was growing longer every day. He typed carefully. The humans engage in a practice they call working out, in which they deliberately damage their own muscle fibers through extreme exertion so that the fibers will grow back stronger. They do this every day. They consider it relaxing. He added another note. I observed them consuming their evening meal today. One of them, the one called Tomas, added a red powder to his food that made his eyes water and his face turn red. When I asked if it was a toxin, he confirmed that it was indeed a chemical called capsaicin that causes a pain response in human tissue. Declined. And one more. They sleep only 6 to 7 hours per night. The one called Lena sleeps 5. When I expressed concern, she told me that during something called finals week at her previous school, she once functioned for 4 days on what she described as caffeine and anger. I do not know what caffeine is, but I am afraid to ask. He saved the document and sat in the dark for a long time, glowing a soft, worried orange. The night before the crucible, Riley went to the human quarters to wish them luck. He expected to find them anxious, preparing, perhaps running through mental exercises or meditating on the challenge ahead. Instead, he found Tomas doing a handstand against the wall while humming a song. Priya was reading a book that had nothing to do with fitness. Darius was asleep on a couch with one arm hanging off the edge. Maya was sitting cross-legged on the floor, calmly braiding Lena's hair, while they talked about something called a really good taco place in Austin. Are you not nervous? Riley asked, his glow flickering between green and yellow. Maya looked up at him and smiled, the kind of smile that could make you feel safe, even when you were terrified. We are honestly just excited to finally move around, she said. This week has been a lot of sitting and scanning. We are ready to stretch our legs. Riley returned to his quarters and opened his document one last time. He stared at the blinking cursor for a full minute before typing his final entry for the night. They do not appear to understand what they are about to do. Or, and this is the possibility that keeps me awake, they understand perfectly, and it simply does not concern them. He closed the file. The morning of the Crucible of Valor broke under a pale violet sky, and the entire academy came to watch. The testing grounds stretched across 3 kilometers of engineered terrain, forests, deserts, frozen tundra, open water, and vertical rock faces, all contained within a massive environmental dome that could shift conditions at the push of a button. Stadium seating surrounded the key stages, and every seat was full. Students, faculty, staff, and even galactic press correspondents who had heard the rumors about the Deathworld cohort packed the stands, shoulder to shoulder, and wing to wing, and tendril to tendril. The 5 humans stood together at the starting line, wearing the same standard-issue Academy fitness gear as everyone else. They looked calm, almost too calm. Maya stretched her arms overhead. Darius bounced lightly on his toes. Lena stood perfectly still with her eyes closed, breathing slowly. Tomas was cracking every joint in his body one by one in a way that made the nearest alien students visibly uncomfortable. Priya checked her pulse, nodded to herself, and put her hair up. Sergeant Instructor Keth Vorin stood on the observation platform above the course, all 4 arms clasped behind his back. He had not slept well in a week. The data from the medical assessments sat in his mind like a stone he could not swallow. He told himself it would be fine. He told himself the Crucible had broken the best of the best for 200 years. He told himself that no species, no matter how dense their bones or how slow their hearts, could simply walk through his masterpiece. He was wrong. The first stage was called the Gauntlet, a high-speed obstacle course that stretched 500 meters through shifting terrain. The ground changed beneath your feet without warning, dropping into sand, rising into sharp inclines, and tilting sideways to throw off balance. Rotating barriers swung at random intervals. Simulated projectile blasts fired from the pavement, walls, and you had to dodge them while maintaining speed. The best species in the Academy averaged 8 to 12 minutes. Most considered anything under 6 minutes to be exceptional. Tomas Reyes went first among the humans, and he did not run the course. He played it. He hit the first obstacle at full sprint, vaulted over a rotating barrier with one hand, landed in a roll, and came up laughing. The ground shifted to sand beneath him, and he barely slowed, his legs pumping with the kind of explosive power that came from years of free-running through the streets and rooftops of his home city. A simulated blast fired from his left, and he dodged it with a twist of his hips that looked more like a dance move than a survival reflex. Halfway through the course he did a wall run off a tilting panel, something the course designers had never intended anyone to do, and used the momentum to skip an entire section of barriers. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Finish line in 3 minutes and 42 seconds. The scoreboard displayed the time, glitched, showed an error code, corrected itself, and displayed the time again. No one in the stadium spoke. Lena went next. She ran the gauntlet like a machine. No wasted movement, no style, no sound. She took every obstacle by the shortest possible path, her body low and efficient, her eyes reading the terrain 3 steps ahead at all times. She finished in 3 minutes and 58 seconds, and she was not breathing hard when she crossed the line. She simply stopped, turned around, and watched the others. Maya, Darius, and Priya finished within the next several minutes, each of them completing the course in under 5 minutes. The slowest human time was 4 minutes and 47 seconds, which would have been a record-breaking performance for any other species in Academy history. The announcer, a Tessavari with a magnificent crest of feathers, opened and closed his beak several times without managing to say anything useful. The second stage was called the Forge, a test of raw brute strength. Students faced a series of 10 stations, each with a progressively heavier object to lift, carry, push, or throw. The weights were calibrated so that the strongest species on campus, the Drahini, typically maxed out at stage 7. The theoretical maximum was stage 10, but no living being had ever cleared it. The designers had included it purely as an aspirational ceiling, a number on a chart that would never be touched. Darius cleared stage 10. He walked up to the final weight, a gravitational mass unit that weighed more than some species' entire body weight, wrapped his huge hands around it, set his legs, and lifted it off the ground with a sound that came from somewhere deep in his chest. He carried it the required distance, set it down with controlled precision, and then stood there for a moment, looking around. "Is there a stage 11?" he asked. There was not. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in a kind of collective disbelief, a sound that was half gasp and half something that did not have a name in any galactic language. Maya cleared stage 9. Priya and Lena cleared stage 8. Tomas cleared stage 7, the lowest human score, which tied the all-time Academy record, previously held by a Drahini Special Operations veteran. Up in the stands, Vas Keltron sat in his seat and watched. He had completed stage 7 himself just an hour earlier, and he had been proud of it. Now he gripped the armrest of his seat so hard that it cracked under his fingers. The third stage was called the Drowning Sky, an environmental endurance chamber that cycled through extreme conditions. The room started with scorching heat, then transitioned to freezing cold, then dropped the oxygen content to dangerously low levels, then increased humidity to near saturation, then hit the occupants with disorienting strobe lights and sonic pressure waves. The test measured how long a student could remain standing and conscious under these conditions. The average time was 14 minutes. The Academy record was 22. The humans walked into the chamber together, and the heat phase began. The temperature climbed to what the Academy considered extreme, 45 degrees Celsius. Maya wiped sweat from her forehead and kept walking. Darius unbuttoned the top of his fitness jacket and said, "This is like Houston in July." The cold phase dropped the temperature to -15 Celsius. The alien students who had made it this far began shaking and dropping within minutes. Lena Voronova stood in the center of the room with her arms at her sides, perfectly still, her expression utterly flat. She had grown up in Yakutsk, where winter temperatures regularly dropped below -40. This was nothing to her. This was spring. The low oxygen phase hit next. Non-human students collapsed within the first 2 minutes. Their lungs were not built for this kind of deprivation. But Priya closed her eyes and began the controlled breathing technique she had practiced during years of marathon training at altitude. She slowed her oxygen consumption, steadied her heart rate, and stood like a statue while the air thinned around her. All 5 humans endured the full 30-minute maximum, the hard cap built into the system, because the designers had assumed no biological organism could possibly last that long. In the control room, Keth Voren stared at his monitors. His 4 hands were trembling. A technician beside him asked quietly if the chamber had malfunctioned. "The chamber is working perfectly," Keth Voren said in a voice that sounded like it belonged to someone very far away. The chamber was never the problem. The 4th stage was called the Long Road, a continuous 10-kilometer route that required running, climbing, crawling, and swimming through varied terrain with no rest stops. The average completion time was 3 to 4 hours, and many students did not finish at all. The humans paced themselves, something the other species did not know how to do. Most alien students sprinted at the start and burned out within the first few kilometers. The humans ran at a steady, measured pace, talking to each other as they went, conserving energy, managing their breathing, and treating the whole thing like a weekend training run. 3 kilometers in, they started finding collapsed alien students along the route. Darius slowed down beside a small Kwarvani student, not really, who had fallen and could not get up. The little creature was shaking, and its glow had faded to almost nothing. Without a word, Darius bent down, scooped the student up, placed them gently on his back, and kept running. He carried that student for 2 full kilometers, while jogging at a pace that was still faster than most species could. Manage unloaded. The cameras caught everything. The stadium screens showed the massive human carrying the tiny glowing alien on his back like it was the most natural thing in the world. And something shifted in the crowd. The fear did not go away, not entirely, but something else began to grow beside it. Priya finished first. Her time was 58 minutes. The previous record had been 1 hour and 47 minutes. Every human finished in under 1 hour and 10 minutes. The 5th and final stage was called the Summit, a towering vertical climb that reached 80 meters into the air. The holds shifted, the wall tilted, gravity fields fluctuated unpredictably, and a thick sensory fog filled the upper levels, making it nearly impossible to see or hear. It was designed to find the breaking point, the exact moment when the body was exhausted and only the mind could carry you forward. Most students never reached the top. The humans were tired now, genuinely, truly tired. They had been going for hours, and the previous stages had taken real effort from them. This was not a warm-up anymore. This was hard. Maya grabbed the first hold and started climbing. Her arms burned. Her fingers ached. The wall tilted beneath her and she pressed her body flat against it and held on, breathing hard, refusing to let go. Darius climbed with shaking arms, his massive frame working against him on the narrow holds, but his grip strength refusing to quit. Tomas went quiet for the first time all day, all his energy focused into a single point of concentration, as he found each hold by feel, through the blinding fog. Priya climbed with the grim patience of someone who had run through pain her entire life. Lena reached the summit first. She pulled herself over the top edge with a final heave, lay on her back for 3 seconds, then stood. She looked down at the stadium far below, at the thousands of alien faces staring up, and she did not celebrate, raise a fist or shout. She simply stood there and waited for the others. One by one, they made it. Maya next, then Darius, then Priya, and finally Tomas, who collapsed on his back at the top and stared at the sky while his chest heaved. They sat together at the summit in silence for a long moment. 5 humans from a furious little planet, sitting on top of a challenge the galaxy had thought was impossible. Below them, the stadium had lost its mind. The scoreboard lit up with the final results. All 5 humans had achieved a perfect score. Every stage completed, every threshold met or exceeded, every record broken. In 200 years of the Crucible of Valor, not a single student had ever earned a perfect score. Today, 5 had done it at the same time. Kethvorin stood alone in the control booth, surrounded by screens filled with data that should not have existed. He sat down slowly. He opened the human homeworld file one more time and read the Deathworld classification that he had been trying to ignore all week. Category 7. He closed the file and spoke to the empty room, and his voice was barely a whisper. The test was never designed for anything like them. The galaxy found out in less than 12 hours. Someone in the stadium had recorded Tomas laughing his way through the gauntlet and posted it on the interstellar network before the Crucible was even finished. By morning, the clip had been shared 40 million times across 900 worlds. By noon, it had 100 million views, and someone had set it to music. Then the clip of Darius asking for Stage 11 went viral, followed by the footage of him carrying the collapsed Corvani student on his back for 2 kilometers, followed by the image of all 5 humans sitting calmly at the summit of the final climb, tired, bruised, and completely unbothered. The comment sections across the galactic network were a war zone. "What are these creatures and why have we not been told about them?" wrote a Pelori academic on a science forum. "That is not physically possible," wrote a Drahini fitness instructor. "Them eat a plant that is literally on fire," wrote a Tesavari student who had been seated near the humans at dinner the night before. "They put the fire plant on something called a burger, and they ate it with their hands. I am not okay." Back at the academy, the faculty called an emergency meeting within 24 hours of the Crucible results. The senior staff gathered in the main conference chamber. 24 instructors and administrators from a dozen different species, seated around a curved table beneath soft white lights. Kethvorin stood at the front, with a display screen behind him, and he looked like he had not slept in days, because he had not slept in days. "I will be direct," Kethvorin said, all 4 of his hands resting flat on the table. "The Crucible of Valor was not rigged. The equipment did not malfunction. The scoring system is accurate. I have verified every data point personally." "Then how do you explain 5 perfect scores from a single cohort?" demanded Professor Zelith, a Gelish administrator whose gelatinous body rippled with agitation. 5 perfect scores from a species that has never even left its own solar system before this year. "I explain it," Kethvorin said carefully, "by explaining what that species is." He activated the display behind him, and the room filled with data, charts, graphs, biological readouts, and environmental statistics. He walked them through it piece by piece, and the room got quieter with every slide. "Earth's gravity is 1.4 times our galactic standard," he said. "Every human who has ever lived has grown up carrying 40% more weight on their skeleton than any of us ever have. Their bones are denser, their muscles are stronger, their cardiovascular systems are more efficient. Not because they trained for it, because their planet demanded it from birth." He moved to the next slide. "Earth's atmosphere is a volatile oxygen-nitrogen mix with an oxygen concentration high enough to make combustion easy. Their world regularly catches fire, and they consider this a manageable seasonal inconvenience. They call these events wildfire season, and continue living in the affected areas." The room was very still. Earth's surface temperature varies by over 120 degrees across its geography and seasons. Their species has colonized every climate zone on their planet, from frozen wastelands to boiling deserts to tropical jungles filled with venomous predators. They do not specialize for any single environment. They adapt to all of them. He paused and looked at the faces around the table. Their world is classified as a death world, Category 7. This is not a bureaucratic label. This means that Earth is one of the most hostile habitable environments ever documented by the Galactic Survey Corps. Every organism on that planet exists in a state of perpetual competition for survival. They are through training or technology. They became what they are because anything less would have been killed and eaten millions of years ago. Professor Zeleth had stopped rippling. He was completely still. You are saying the Crucible was not difficult for them? I am saying, Keth Voron replied, and his voice carried a weight that filled the room, that the Crucible of Valor, the test I spent 15 years designing to push every known species to their absolute limit, is roughly equivalent to what humans call a moderate fitness test on their homeworld. They have harder evaluations for their basic military recruits. No one spoke for a very long time. Outside the meeting room, the campus was going through its own transformation. The humans had become the most talked about students in Academy history, and the 5 of them had no idea how to handle it. Darius kept telling anyone who would listen that the Crucible really was not that bad. Understand why this made things worse instead of better. Tomaz had accidentally become a galactic celebrity, and was deeply confused by the alien students who now asked to take pictures with him. Priya had been contacted by 4 different xenobiology departments asking if she would consent to being studied, and she had politely declined all of them. Maya held the group together the way she always did, with steady calm and a clear head. She reminded them why they were here and what they represented. She told them to stay humble, stay kind, and keep training. But something had changed, and even Maya could feel it. The alien students no longer just stared at them with fear. Some of them stared with curiosity now, and a few brave ones had started sitting closer to the humans in the dining hall. A Tesavari student named Kithara had asked Priya about her breathing technique during the drowning sky. A young Pelori engineering student had asked Darius how human muscles recovered quickly after heavy exertion. The walls were coming down, slowly, unevenly, but they were coming down. The most unexpected change came from Voss Keltron. The Drahimi had not spoken to anyone since the Crucible. He had disappeared from the gym, from the dining hall, from all the places where he had once been the loudest and most visible presence in the room. 3 days after the test, he found Maya sitting alone on a bench near the Biodome Gardens, and he stood in front of her for a long time before speaking. How? He asked, and the single word carried more vulnerability than anything he had ever said in his life. Maya looked up at him. She could see the pain behind his eyes. Not anger, not jealousy, but the deep hurt of someone whose entire identity had been built on being the strongest, the fastest, the best, and who had just discovered that the universe was much bigger than he thought. She did not boast. She did not lecture. She said quietly, "Everything is trying to kill you. The weather tries to kill you. The animals try to kill you. The ground under your feet tries to kill you. So you either get strong or you do not get to grow up." She paused. "It is not a gift, Voss. It is just survival." He stood there for a long time, processing this. Then he nodded once and walked away. But something in his posture had changed. The rigid arrogance had softened into something that looked almost like respect. That same evening, Riley's research document went live. He had published it anonymously on the Academy's internal academic network under the title Observations on Humans, a Field Study in Terror, and it spread through the student body like fire through dry grass, which, he reflected, was something that apparently happened regularly on Earth. The excerpts became legendary within hours. Humans engage in a practice called jogging, in which they run long distances for no purpose other than to maintain their ability to run long distances. This is not preparation for any specific event or threat. They simply believe they should be able to run at all times, in case running becomes necessary. They have a phrase for this: staying in shape, as though their current physical form is something that must be actively defended against decay. I observed the human called Darius consume a meal, consisting of what he described as leftovers from 3 different restaurants, combined into a single plate. He ate this in 4 minutes. When I asked if the combination was intended to provide balanced nutrition, he laughed and said he was just really hungry. Their relationship with food appears to be adversarial and loving in equal measure. When injured, humans do not typically cease activity. They have a saying, "walk it off," which suggests that the appropriate response to physical damage is to continue moving as though nothing has happened. Their toe on a door frame with enough force to make a cracking sound. The human cursed loudly, limped for approximately 30 seconds, and then resumed walking normally. I later learned the toe was fractured. They form social bonds through shared suffering. Their term for this is team building. I am beginning to understand that this is not metaphorical. The document went beyond humor, though. Riley had written a conclusion that surprised everyone, including himself. I was afraid of the humans when they arrived. I believe most of us were. We had been told that Deathworld species were violent, unpredictable, and dangerous. What I have observed instead is a species that is strong beyond our comprehension, and yet chooses, deliberately and consistently, to be gentle. They carry the wounded. They share their food. They laugh when they are in pain, and they hold each other up when they are tired. They are not monsters. They are the products of a world that never stopped testing them. And they responded not with cruelty, but with kindness. I do not know if the galaxy is ready for them, but I believe the galaxy needs them. Priya found the document first, and read it aloud to the group in their quarters. Tomas pretended not to be emotional about it, and failed completely. Darius definitely was not crying. He was just allergic to something, he said. Lena read the section about the fractured toe, and confirmed that it was accurate. Maya listened to all of it, and then sat alone on the campus rooftop that night, looking up at stars she did not recognize. Riley found her there, his glow a soft, calm blue for the first time since she had met him. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I keep thinking about why we are here," she said. "I did not come to set records or break tests. I came because I wanted to show the galaxy that humans are more than what the files say, more than a Deathworld classification, more than dense bones and fast reflexes." "That," Riley said. She looked at him. "Did we?" "You carried people, Maya. Your friend Darius picked up a stranger who had fallen, and carried them on his back without being asked. That is what the galaxy saw today. Not the scores, not the records. A Deathworld species that stopped in the middle of a competition to help someone weaker." His glow brightened. "That's what they will remember." Maya smiled, and for a moment the unfamiliar stars did not feel so far away. The next morning, a formal communique arrived at the Academy, bearing the seal of the Galactic Defense Council, the highest military authority in known space. It was addressed to the human cohort. Maya read it aloud to the group in their quarters, and the room went very still. The letter referenced a dormant threat along the galaxy's outer rim, something that had been probing the border territories for decades, something that no conventional species had been able to confront because the environment in which it operated was too hostile for any known biology to survive. The letter said the Council had reviewed the Crucible footage. They said they believed they had finally found a species that might be built to face what was coming. They were not requesting the humans as students anymore. They were requesting them as consultants. The room was silent for a long time. Then Darius cracked his knuckles, leaned back in his chair, and grinned. "So, when do we start?" 1 week after the Crucible of Valor, the Academy convened a formal assembly in the Grand Auditorium, the largest enclosed space on campus, a cathedral of crystal and light, that could hold every student, every faculty member, and every visiting dignitary at once. It had only been used 3 times in the Academy's 200-year history, and the last time had been for the declaration of the Orion Nebula Peace Accords. Today, it was full. Every seat was taken, and beings stood in the aisles and clustered in the doorways. The galactic press had sent correspondents from dozens of worlds, and their recording drones hovered in a silent cloud above the stage. Holoscreen relays carried the event live to billions of viewers across the network. The 5 humans sat in the front row, wearing their Academy uniforms, looking deeply uncomfortable with the entire situation. Tomas kept tugging at his collar. Darius sat with his hands on his knees, unusually still, ahead with the focused calm of someone who was quietly terrified. Priya had her notebook in her lap, but she was not writing in it. Lena sat the way she always sat, perfectly still, perfectly composed, giving away nothing. Beside them Riley glowed a soft and steady blue. He had not left their side all week. Sergeant Instructor Kethvoran walked to the podium first. His forearms were folded behind his back, and his gray stone-like face was unreadable. But those who knew him well could see something different in the way he moved. There was a heaviness to him, not of defeat, but of reckoning. The weight of a man who had spent his life building something he believed was perfect, and who now understood that perfection was a smaller thing than he had imagined. I have spent 15 years designing and refining the Crucible of Valor, Kethvoran began, his voice carrying to every corner of the auditorium. I built it to be the definitive test of physical and mental capability for every species in the galactic community. I calibrated it against the biological limits of over 300 known species. I believed, truly believed, that it represented the outer boundary of what living organisms could achieve. He paused, and the silence in the auditorium was absolute. I was wrong. The words hung in the air like something physical. The Crucible was never designed with Deathworld biology in mind, because Deathworld species were never considered viable candidates for galactic integration. We excluded them not because we had tested them and found them lacking, but because we assumed without testing that they could not belong here. That was not a failure of the Crucible. It was a failure of imagination, my imagination, and the imagination of every institution that made the same assumption. He turned and looked directly at the 5 humans in the front row. I formally recommend that the Academy redesign its fitness and evaluation standards to account for the full spectrum of galactic biology, including Deathworld species. The galaxy is larger than we thought, and it contains more possibility than we allowed ourselves to see. Then Kethvoran did something that made every Shelvari in the auditorium gasp. He raised all 4 arms, slowly, deliberately, and extended them toward the humans, palms open, fingers spread. It was the Velthorin, the highest gesture of respect in Shelvari culture, reserved for those who had fundamentally changed your understanding of the world. It had not been performed in a public setting in over 60 years. Maya stood and bowed her head in return. She did not know the exact meaning of the gesture, but she understood its weight. Kethvoran stepped back from the podium, and the Galactic Defense Council representative took his place. Her name was Admiral Sethania Cole, a Violathi, tall and insectoid, with iridescent wings folded tight against her back, and compound eyes that reflected the light of the auditorium like dark jewels. She moved with the precision of someone who had commanded warships, and the gravity of someone who carried secrets. What I am about to share is not classified, but it is not widely known, Admiral Cole said. For the past 4 decades, the Galactic Defense Council has been monitoring an incursion along the galaxy's outer rim. A hostile extragalactic entity, we designate it the Veilk Threshold, has been probing our border territories with increasing frequency and aggression. The auditorium stirred. A murmur rolled through the crowd like a wave. The Veilk do not communicate, do not negotiate, and do not retreat. They occupy and consume. The territories they have taken are now environments of extreme hostility. High gravity, toxic atmospheres, temperature extremes, and radiation levels that exceed the survival parameters of every species we have sent to engage them. She paused, and let the implications settle. Settle. We have lost ships. We have lost soldiers. We have spent decades searching for a biological solution, a species that could survive sustained operations in Veil-controlled space. We explored genetic modification, mechanical augmentation, and environmental shielding. Nothing worked. The conditions were simply too extreme for any known galactic biology to endure. Admiral Cole turned and looked at the humans. And then we watched 5 students from a Category 7 Deathworld sit in an environmental extremes chamber for 30 minutes and complain that it was not challenging enough. A nervous ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. The Defense Council has reviewed the Crucible footage in detail. We have compared the environmental parameters of the Crucible's endurance chamber with the conditions in Veil-controlled space. The overlap is significant, not perfect, but significant. Your homeworld, Earth, has apparently been preparing your species for exactly this kind of challenge for millions of years. She straightened. We are not here to recruit you. We are not here to draft you or to turn you into weapons. We are here to ask, respectfully and with full understanding of what we are asking, whether you would be willing to help us. The auditorium was silent. Maya looked at her team. Darius gave her a small nod. Priya closed her notebook. Tomaz cracked his knuckles. Lena met her eyes and held them. Maya stood. She had not prepared a speech. She had not expected to speak at all. She walked to the podium on legs that felt unsteady, and looked out at an auditorium full of faces that did not look like hers. Faces with feathers and scales, and bioluminescent skin, and compound eyes, and no faces at all. Just shapes and colors and textures that represented a galaxy so vast and so varied that it made her chest ache. She gripped the edges of the podium and spoke. I grew up on a planet that tried to kill me. Every single day, she said. The sun burned us. The cold froze us. The ground shook under our feet, and the oceans tried to swallow us whole, and that was just the weather. A few beings in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. We evolved alongside predators that were faster than us, and stronger than us, and had better claws and bigger teeth. We should not have survived. But we did. Not because we were the toughest things on our planet, but because we were the most stubborn. We refused to die. We refused to give up. We fell down and we got back up, over and over and over, for millions of years, until getting back up was the only thing we knew how to do. Her voice steadied. But I need you to understand something. Earth did not make us weapons. Earth made us survivors. And survivors do not just look out for themselves. She paused and looked at Darius. When we see someone fall, we pick them up. When we see someone who cannot keep going, we carry them. That is not strategy, training. That is just who we are. She looked back out at the crowd. You spent centuries looking at our planet and seeing a death world, a place of danger, a place that produces monsters. And I understand why the numbers are scary. The data is extreme. And we do things that must seem insane to you. We eat poison for fun and run until our bodies break. And then we get up the next morning and do it again. A quiet laugh from somewhere in the crowd. But here is what the data does not show you. The data does not show you that we sing songs around fires at night. It does not show you that we write poetry about the stars. It does not show you that we build homes in the most dangerous places on our planet, and fill those homes with love and laughter, and terrible cooking and children who grow up believing that the universe is full of wonder. The auditorium was completely still. Earth is not just a death world. It is our home, and we love it. Every terrifying, terrible year. Beautiful, impossible part of it. That love is what made us strong. Not the gravity, not the predators, not the volcanoes. The love. She took a breath. If the galaxy needs help, Earth will answer. Not because we are the strongest, or the fastest, or the hardest to kill, but because that is what you do when someone needs you. You show up, you stand beside them, and you do not leave. She stepped back from the podium. For a moment there was nothing, just silence, vast and ringing. Then Vas Keltran stood. The Drahini rose from his seat in the middle of the auditorium, his armored frame towering over the species around him, and he brought his hands together in a slow, deliberate clap that echoed through the chamber like thunder. Rilly stood next, his entire body blazing with light, white and gold and brilliant blue, the Corvani expression of overwhelming emotion, and the tears that ran down his translucent face glowed like tiny stars. Tassavari stood, their feathered crests rising in unison. Then the Pelori, the Gelish, the Vielatai, one by one, and then all at once, until the entire auditorium was on its feet, and the sound was not just applause, but something deeper, something that sounded like the first note of a song the galaxy had been waiting a very long time to sing. The weeks that followed changed everything. The 5 humans were reassigned from standard academy curriculum to a specialized joint training program under the direct oversight of both the Academy and the Defense Council. They would still be students, but they would also be preparing for something larger, a mission to the Rim, a confrontation with the Veilk, a challenge that the galaxy had been afraid to face alone. But they would not be facing it alone either. A mixed species unit began to form around them, volunteers from across the Academy who had watched the Crucible and seen something that made them want to be braver then. They were Vas Keltran, was the first to sign up. He showed up to the human training sessions the morning after Maya's speech, and asked Darius to teach him how humans trained. Darius grinned and said, "I hope you like running." Rilly formally requested transfer to the human unit as science liaison and xenobiology advisor. His request was approved in record time, partly because his research on human biology was the most comprehensive in the Academy, and partly because no one else had volunteered for a position that required spending extended time in close proximity to Deathworld organisms. Kithara, the Tessavari student who had asked Priya about breathing techniques, joined as a medical support specialist. A young Pelori engineer named Dravos signed on to handle equipment and environmental adaptation. 3 more students followed, then 5 more, then 10. The unit grew, and as it grew, something remarkable happened. The aliens who trained alongside the humans began to get stronger. Not because human biology was contagious, but because human determination was. Darius encouraged everyone. Priya taught breathing and pacing techniques. Tomas turned obstacle courses into games that made the training feel less like punishment and more like play. Lena said very little, but led by example, and her quiet relentlessness inspired more than any speech could. Maya held them all together with a steady hand and a vision that was simple and clear. They were a team, regardless of species, and they would face whatever came next together. The final image of this chapter in galactic history was captured by a press drone on a quiet evening 3 weeks after the assembly. The 5 humans stood at the edge of the Academy's observation deck, looking out at the galaxy's rim, that dark, distant border where something terrible waited. The sky was full of unfamiliar stars and the light of 100 billion worlds. Tomas said something. No one ever found out what. Maya laughed. The others followed, and the sound of 5 humans laughing on the edge of the unknown was warm and bright and completely unafraid. Behind them, their alien teammates were gathering. Drawn by the sound they came, Vas and Rilly and Kithara and Dravos, and all the others, stepping out onto the observation deck to stand beside the humans. to look at the same sky, to share the same moment. The galaxy had spent centuries afraid of what Deathworlds produce. Now, for the first time, it was grateful. And somewhere, on a furious little planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, 8 billion people went about their lives, running, laughing, fighting, loving, falling down and getting back up again, with no idea that their 5 children on the far side of the galaxy had just changed everything. The galaxy had designed its ultimate test to find the limits of the possible. It had never occurred to them that somewhere out there, an entire species had been passing that test every single day, just by staying alive.